Welcome back, everybody. It's Antietam 162. I'm Gary Adelman. We're here with Dennis Frye.
Hi, everyone.
And we are going to take you on our second video here. Here we're going to take a little walk past a famous place to some places you probably haven't gone yet as we check out more of this battlefield. By way of reminder, there was already fierce fighting raging at places you've heard of. The Hagerstown Pike that we stand on now, the cornfield, the East Woods, and bleeding out into other areas. The Union will advance near this area just as the Union Second Corps under Sumner is going to maybe do a coup de grace, and they're going to advance into the woods that are behind the Dunker Church over here, the West Woods, and they're going to advance and maybe outflank Robert E. Lee. This is going to be great. What could go wrong,
Do you know what coup de grace is in German?
Nine,
because that's what they would be speaking here, German. We still have people living here in 1862 that are speaking German. Most of the people that lived here were of German descent. Not too many original folks coming over at this point, but descendants of those that have been here in the 1770s, 1780s. And this church right here, the Dunker Church, the Dunkers. I know a lot about the Dunkers.
Yes, you do, Dennis.
I am an actual Dunker. I'm a member of this particular denomination. Now, Dunker's always been a nickname. The actual denomination at the time of the Civil War was called German Baptist Brethren. And there were a lot of German Baptist brethren that settled here in the Antietam Valley, in Pleasant Valley, in the Shenandoah Valley, in the Cumberland Valley, all these areas in this vicinity, by the tens of thousands. And they were farmers, and they built a meeting house. You know, the Quakers call it a meeting house. The Dunkers basically called it a meeting house. Notice, so simple. In fact, John Bell Hood confused this for a schoolhouse. He thought that it was a schoolhouse here rather than a meeting house. And so a place of worship. It was given by the Miller family to the Dunkers in 1851. Church was built at that time. And you know, here's the most important thing actually in terms of the battle, is that this thing was whitewashed as you see it today then. And it could be seen from all over the field around us. So that church stood out like a full moon on a dark night sky. And it became an objective point, a place, a target for Union assaults, assault after assault after assault. And one other thing I'll point out is opposite the Dunker Church, look over here at the high ground, this is where Lee was, emphasis on was. He's lost this position. We are now to what would have been the rear of the Confederate line. Now the Yankees hold all this. This was Lee's left center. He lost his left center. It's gone, disintegrated. And so the Federal Army is facing us, and they're now ready to move into the woods around the Dunker Church because it's quiet, Gary. It's quiet. One final thing about the Dunkers. These folks, they're pacifist. They are pacifist. They don't believe in war. That was one of the founding tenets of this church. No war, peace. And here at Antietam, the people who attend this church, pacifist, are hosting on their farms, on their ground, around their houses and barns, the bloodiest day in American history. Still makes me cry as a Dunker myself.
And just imagine here, come on, Andy Poulton behind the camera there. It's true, we tend to think that, you know, maybe when Samuel Moomaw donated this land and they built the sort of meeting house, that it was somehow destined to play a role. No, people have been living here for decades upon decades, and then one day the troops show up, and then they fight for one terrible day, and then they leave, and the place is forever changed.
And it's a wreck. It's a wreck.
Yeah.
I mean, Moomaw loses his barn, loses his house. It's a terrible, terrible day. There's dead bodies all over their fields. There's unexploded ordnance all over the place. It's dangerous. And it's going to become a graveyard, as you know so well. It's
your
going to become a
crops are
graveyard.
gone. A lot of some barns burned, including Moomaw's.
And what a terrible time, because it's fall. You're not going to have time to recover.
No way. A couple of things real quick. I want to get onto the fighting, but first I have an important question for you, Dennis. Okay, this might lighten things up a little bit. Were you dunked?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. This is the way it works. Real quick.
Full immersion baptism. Here we go. Wow, he's getting into it.
There's a church in the background. When you're baptized as a Dunker, it's by choice. It's adult choice. There's no such thing as infant baptism. And so the Dunkers are called Dunkers because we are completely submerged beneath water as follows. In the name of the Father, under. In the name of the Son, under. In the name of the Holy Spirit, completely under. 3 times, trine immersion. That's how they got the nickname Dunker. I was baptized like that on Easter Day. My grandmother Frye was baptized in a creek, Israel Creek in nearby Pleasant Valley, on Christmas Day. They broke ice for her baptism.
And you left out in which creek you were baptized.
I wish I was baptized in a creek.
Okay,
Yeah.
Excuse me.
By the time I was baptized,
Curious omission.
it was Easter Day. It was snowing like crazy outside. My grandmother
Wow.
Frye would have been proud of me to be baptized in Israel Creek. I was baptized in a very nice interior baptismal pool.
All right.
Everything was nice and warm.
All right,
I'm
I'm
embarrassed
sure it
by
was.
that.
Okay,
If
well,
I could do that over.
Well, then I'm really not sorry I brought it up. Okay, so
I'm embarrassed.
You're with the American Battlefield Trust. We've just walked behind the Dunker Church, or west of the Dunker Church, to check out some areas most people don't come. Now, by way of reminder, let's slow down for a second here. In the morning, you basically have Union troops, 1st Corps, 12th Corps, sort of moving this way. And especially these 12th Corps troops are going to take position near the Dunker Church. Some are going to occupy this position right here, okay? And that's when the Union 2nd Corps comes on a different trajectory. 1st and 12th coming this way, but here comes the advanced element, Sedgwick's division of the 2nd Corps this way.
It's McClellan's reinforcements. Now, we never usually talk about George McClellan and reinforcement in the same breath. But here we have reinforcements. He's feeling optimistic. He's feeling good. He has seen Lee's line disintegrate over here. And so let's send in the 2nd Corps, Veteran Corps, trusted men, veterans.
Largest corps.
And they're going to destroy Lee. We're going to wipe him out right now.
And let's think about this. Like, you might think he's crazy because they're going to meet with disaster, but only one of his 3 divisions, the large one under Sedgwick, makes it here. The other 2 go to meet their destiny at the Sunken Road or Bloody Lane that we'll talk about soon enough. Now, we're walking on a road most people don't even know about. This is Confederate Avenue, and it's, you know, been sort of bisected by a modern bypass that we'll see before long, but there's real fighting going on in here. In summary, and we have something to mention about some of this land here, because we can actually walk on it a little bit today during our shooting here. When Sumner's guys come up here, the Confederates show up with a massive and powerful counterattack. Is that right?
Yes, in fact, this direction is Harper's Ferry. Now, Harper's Ferry is not far from here. On a map, a straight line, it's only about 10 miles. To march here is a little bit further, maybe up to 13 to 14 miles if you're coming via the West Virginia route. But the point is that Lee's got reinforcements coming that weren't here when the battle began. And they're arriving, and they're arriving, and they're arriving throughout the day coming up from Harper's Ferry. And so at this key juncture, at this moment, as the Union Army, as Gary points out, as the Union Army is moving this direction into the West Woods, and incidentally, notice all this open ground here that we see? Let's look this way. Notice the woods here. All of this is woods. All of this is woods, the West Woods. It's massive. It's over 100 acres. It doesn't look like this. You can see through the there's no understory. We have animals that eat the understory. That's the way you farm back in those days. Farmers do that again today that way. And so you could see, and so you could pass through the West Woods. But this open space here was not open. This was also all part of the woods.
Good, good. And so what's going to happen here is that the Confederates under McLaws and others are going to start to compromise the Union left flank because they're moving over here.
Let me represent the Union Army.
Good.
You be the Confederates.
Okay, good, good. Here I come.
Okay, look at how we're positioned. I'm the Union Army going this direction. Look at the problem here.
And hold on, stop for a sec. And we're going to do this.
Yes.
We're going to come up on the flank, a little bit into the rear, and I've got Jubal Early and others here on the front on Hauser's Ridge over there. This is a terrible position for John Sedgwick.
It's terrible. And to make matters even worse, he has more Union lines coming up. He's got 2 more brigades of his division coming up behind him. And so what happens here is that the front brigade, Gary, be the front brigade for just a second.
I'm Gorman.
Okay, all right, you're Gorman, all right. Gorman, General Gorman, charge of the 1st Brigade here. This guy was the territorial governor of Minnesota. He created the 1st Minnesota Regiment, the only Minnesota regiment in the Army of the Potomac he commanded. So he's in charge here. He's good. He's a Mexican War veteran, so he knows what he's doing. He didn't count on this. So watch Gary, watch me for a moment. Gary's facing forward. Here comes 50 yards distant, the 2nd Supporting Brigade. This is Dana's brigade. Napoleon, Tecumseh, Jackson, Dana. Here we come. And all of a sudden, the Confederates come between me and Gary. They come on our flank between us. And as a result, in my brigade, I start firing wildly. And look what happens to Gary. That's Union. That's my side. you know, bullets don't discriminate between Confederate and Union when you're firing. And so I'm starting to take out my own men in friendly fire. This is a horrible situation.
And even behind Dana is Oliver Otis Howard. Okay, and Howard is going to get compromised as well, but luckily this dude is good at being flanked. He knows what to do. He's great on the retreat, often gets promoted as a result or anything like that. He won't have just a brigade for very long. Now, Andy gestured us over here, and then we're going to keep walking a little bit. Dennis, we now have the chance, see our other video that we've already posted, to preserve this incredible hole in the donut, more than 10 acres right behind the Dunker Church. You saw where we just walked from. The Dunker Church is right down that road over there.
100 yards away.
Okay? And we can preserve all this open land here, all the way to the tree line, and then if Andy will pan over this way too, all the way beyond this tree line to the bypass that we're going to reach in just a moment. Okay, now that's a good, go ahead.
And the idea is that we will restore this. We will take this field, which wasn't a field on battle day, but woods, and working with the American Battlefield Trust and hopefully the Save Historic Antietam Foundation as a partner, we will be able to restore this landscape by planting hundreds and hundreds of trees in here that eventually will reforest as part of the West Woods.
Just like we did in concert with the Maryland Transportation Highway Administration, as well as Save Historic Antietam Foundation, where we did at the epicenter in the middle of the Antietam battlefield. And those east woods are regrowing pretty well because the veterans were kind enough and had the foresight to mark where the edges of the woods were. We have a great understanding of where the West Woods actually were.
It's really interesting when you look at the monument here for the 34th New York, which we just passed a moment ago. It actually indicates, it uses the word extinct to describe the West Woods, because when they built that monument in the early part of the 20th century, these woods were completely gone. And so part of it is back, and we're going to bring the rest of it back as you look here and see all this open space. 20 years from now, our hope will be forest. All forests in the West Woods will be restored.
Okay, so this is great. Thanks, Dennis.
I was
going to break in.
Something important happening here. Gary, come back up here and stand for a moment. All right?
Yes, sir.
Now watch this. Watch what happens with Gary. Let's just start walking forward. You're going to notice something happening here. Come on towards me.
Okay.
What's happening with Gary? What do you see? What do you see? You can see it. You can visualize it. Look what's happening. He's going down, 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 down. All right? Now, that's important because this high ground right here, you want to hang on to it. You want to hold it. That's where the 125th Pennsylvania is. That's where the 34th New York is. This is where the 72nd Pennsylvania is going to become. And they're going to try to hold this high ground. They're not going to succeed because there's just too many Confederates. The Confederates under Lafayette McLaws, as Gary pointed out, are coming up like this on their flank. You know, they've got nearly 5,400 men in these three brigades.
Yeah.
They've got 6 men holding their flank, because they're in 6 parallel lines.
Yes, yes.
6
Gorman,
men.
Dana, and Howard each have 6 guys facing them, and they're going to try to turn and face them, but it's not enough.
Not enough.
And these are Confederates you've heard of. This is Barksdale's Mississippians. This is Kershaw's South Carolinians. These are battle-hardened people.
Paul Sims with the Georgians and the Virginians.
Totally. So note that this
and
ground...
Jubal Early.
Okay, note that this ground has already been blood-soaked, right? So you've got Hood's division moving across part of this land on their way to the cornfield. They're going to fall back eventually. Then you've got this McLaws's attack here. And as we walk a little more, I want to say that the Union is still, even if they can't hold this high ground, they're holding the next ridge over near the Dunker Church, so there are more Confederate attacks.
Yeah,
Let's keep
right.
walking.
So as we go this direction, notice all these trees in front of us. Not there. If we could restore the battlefield historically, those trees don't exist. We're out of the West Woods. That's open. And I'm sorry we can't see beyond those trees. In the wintertime, you can see this. There's a high ridge, a very high ridge just beyond those trees. That's where Lee's gone. That's where he is. That's where Jackson is.
That's his new line
New
because
line.
he wasn't on Dunker Church anymore.
And it's a better line. It's a stronger line, a taller line in terms of elevation, and more abrupt. Lee actually, when he withdraws, goes to a position of strength. And so we can't see it today, but we own it. The American Battlefield Trust own it.
We preserve 3 acres there, 5 next to it, 140 next to that, and 15 next to that. And hopefully someday this will all be part of the National Park Service. We get the rare thumbs up from Andy Poulton there. Now, so we've got all this opportunity here. You've got Lee's line, but Lee also understands, and his subordinates, that they need to try to recapture the Dunker Churchill. Now, this is now like 300-400 yards behind us here, but you're going to have Kershaw, South Carolinians, and then Van Manning's Arkansas, North Carolina troops trying to get it back, right?
It's the most desperate counterattack of the day by the Confederate Army.
And you never hear about it.
You never hear about it. It's never talked about. You want to know why? Because the Park Service Visitor Center sits right in the middle of the action.
Right.
And so it's a parking lot, and it's a visitor center. And so we don't talk about it because it's been so badly compromised. But that's really the key to the battle. Lee wasn't going to give up. Even though he's lost his ground, he's lost his position, the reinforcements have come in, they've slammed the Federals, they've pushed the Federals back. McClellan is saying, what is going on? These are my veteran troops, and they're just being thrown out of the West Woods in chaos and disorder. And Lee says, punch, counterpunch, counterpunch. And he attempts it, but he will fail. The Federals on the hill where the New York Monument is today, and where the Visitor Center is today, that high ground, as Gary points out, they're going to hold it. And that is a critical point that McClellan will maintain and defend for the rest of the day.
And let me just ask, let's take a few steps over here because we can actually do this. Luckily, the family who has long owned this tract, Dennis knows them, and they know we're out shooting today, and we are trying to preserve this. So we hope you can get involved with this effort to preserve this incredible acreage right next to all preserved land, a hole in the donut. But let me just say, I would ask you, you know, you don't have to be a McClellan fan. It's hard to like McClellan sometimes, but that doesn't mean you need to buy into
Most
the
times.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you have to buy into the idea that he had 60, 150,000 troops waiting in reserve. Look at it from his perspective, okay? Everywhere he goes, the Confederates muster reinforcements, including here in the West Woods, where he enters with a very experienced Second Corps division and ends up meeting disaster so bad that the commander of the Corps, Sumner, says, "You're in a bad fix, boys, get out of here." That's not exactly military decorum here. He tries at the Sunken Road. The Confederates are still counterattacking him, even with small numbers, but he just continues to feel like he's outnumbered. He's already predisposed to feel that way. And when he did attack across the middle bridge, bloody fighting ensued, and he was bloodily repulsed there too. So
yeah, I mean, it's also, in this respect, much of this part of the battle is psychological. It's the psychology of George McClellan, his belief that he's outnumbered by the enemy. When this battle begins on the morning of September 17th, McClellan thinks he's got the advantage. Because remember, 2 out of every 3 Confederates aren't here, but have been at Harper's Ferry to take care of the garrison and wipe out that position for Lee. So Lee's waiting for his army to arrive. It's constantly on the move. It's coming up from Harper's Ferry, coming from this direction to get here, and it is arriving. And so as the day goes on, the numbers change, never in favor of Lee. Lee is always outnumbered here, badly outnumbered. But McClellan, in his psychology, thinking that where are all these Confederates coming from, it just proves to him that he's the one that's at the disadvantage. It is a frame of mind, wrong frame of mind, but it is an attitude and psychology that is going to affect McClellan. As a result, Gary, I like to refer to this ground as the turning point. I mean, and it's a psychological turning point. Up until this point, everything has been attack, 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 assault, assault, assault. We're going in, we're going to wipe them out. McClellan's been on the offensive. We don't think of George McClellan ever being on the offensive. And here he is on the offensive. It is not the McClellan
at South Mountain and Antietam.
Right.
Here's the McClellan.
It's not our George McClellan that we typically think of. And then all of a sudden, bam, that switch gets turned just like that, like a light switch from on to off, because when he sees his veteran troops that he had seen fight so well during the 7 days on the peninsula, come thrown out, almost thrown out of here, like taking a ball and just throwing it. McClellan says, uh-oh, he outnumbers me. I don't have that numbers advantage anymore. And McClellan goes on the defensive, and he stays psychologically on the defensive for the rest of the day on September the 17th and the next day on September the 18th. So this is really, you help us buy this land, you literally are buying the turning point on the battlefield.
Wow. And, you know, I'll wrap this up now. I know Andy's been flashing up battle maps already, so you can see the action that went on this tract as you go throughout the day. I'm sure there are more maps that we don't even have time to put up, but one more. Let's flash up the Elliott burial map, because you can see testament to this fight. If you don't believe us, you know, believe the burial map that shows New York, Maryland, and other troops buried on and all around this tract, which is testament to what happened here. And that is why battlefields are and sometimes were and sometimes still are cemeteries. A lot of the dead have been exhumed to the National Cemetery and Rose Hill Cemetery in Hagerstown. Union and Confederate dead not buried in the same place. You don't do that right around the time of a war, right? Except in a few exceptions. So it is testament to it, and we probably think there are still dead that we don't even know about because the numbers just don't add up. There's no active attempt for the Park Service to try to find these remains, but every once in a while they still appear, and then they'll get a proper burial elsewhere in that case.
Got one final comment. Let's turn this way, Andy. Many of you have actually seen this property and didn't realize you've seen it. There's the Hagerstown Turnpike bypass. This was completed after the Centennial, 1963-1964, and here's Confederate Avenue that runs down to it. So you've driven right by. You've gone right by. It's very, very near the famous reclining lion monument of the Massachusetts, 15th Massachusetts Regiment. We're very close to that. The story of Antietam for so long, Gary, has been preservation by the private sector, privately owned property. The original battlefield set aside was about 60 acres. The government owned about 60 acres. Right-of-ways. They bought right-of-ways like Confederate Avenue. So people like me and Gary and Andy and you could walk on public property, but right here is private property, and right here is private property. And the government believed that's all you'd ever need because we're going to farm this forever. This will be always, always farmland. Well, of course, the visionaries of 1890 could never visualize the automobile. That's an impossibility. They could never visualize an interstate highway. They could never visualize the rapid mobility that we have today. And so that put Antietam as a target eventually in the 1980s, about 100 years after the original battlefield was established. By the 1980s, this area is growing rapidly here in Washington County, Maryland. And I am really freaked out about it as a local Washington County boy living here all my life. And I see Antietam threatened and endangered. Too much private property. What saves Antietam are people like this family, private property owners who have owned the ground for generations, who decided that, no, we're not going to sell it to a developer. We're not going to let them put houses on it. We're not going to let them destroy it, but we're going to save it. And so this property owner gives us this opportunity to be able to have the American Battlefield Trust, you as our members, purchase it and save it. It is a great legacy of preservation, and I want to thank this family for giving us this opportunity.
For more than 40 years, Dennis has been talking about and advocating for battlefield preservation. Thanks so much for all he did in the early years that he continues to do here. We hope you're enjoying our Antietam 162 coverage, a combination of historical, heavy, and irreverent sometimes. Thanks to Andy behind the camera. Thank you, Dennis. We got more videos to shoot here as well at Antietam 162. Thanks so much for watching and for supporting battlefield education and preservation.
Hello, this is Trace Atkins. To stay up to date on all the latest and coolest videos, please subscribe to the Trust's YouTube channel. Preserve, educate, inspire.